the best way to get a highest valuation for your business and sell your business for maximum value is proprietary. The 4P is proprietary.
Mm,
This is the number one value driver. So this can take you from a 5 multiple to an 8 multiple to a 10 multiple to a 15 multiple. This
mm,
is all proprietary. So why am I saying you should start with this? Because
mm,
if you get this wrong,
mm.
then you could practically be out of business.
Hey everyone, this is Devin Miller here with another episode of The Inventive Journey. I'm your host, Devin Miller, the serial entrepreneur that's grown several startups into 7 and 8 figure businesses, as well as the founder and CEO of Miller IP Law, where we focus on helping startups and small businesses with their patents and trademarks. If you ever need help with any of yours, reach out to us and go to strategymeeting.com and grab some time with us to chat. Now, today we have another great expert episode, and once a week we have a great expert on, shares a lot of different information. And to this week is no exception. So we have Michelle Seiler Tucker, and she's going to be talking a little bit about generally about M&As, or for those of you that don't know M&As, mergers and acquisitions. And we'll talk a little bit about that, how to be a bit of a sustainable company, how to set up for an exit, kind of what things you should think about when you're going to sell, different types of buyers, how to get top dollar, and whatever else that might come up in the meantime. So I'm sure we'll have a great conversation with that. Welcome on the podcast, Michelle.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Devin.
Absolutely. Excited to have you here. So before we jump into the topic of expertise, maybe just give us kind of the listeners or the audience, 1 or 2 minutes kind of overview as to why you're an expert and why they should trust and listen to you.
I'm not an expert. Don't listen to me. Don't listen to anything I have to say.
That's how I feel sometimes. I'm like, I've been doing this for a while, but I don't know if you ever feel like you're an expert.
Well, you know what? I think it's all about learning, right?
Mm,
When you think you know it all is when you'll figure out you don't very quickly. But okay, so a little bit about me. I've always been in entrepreneurship. I've always owned different businesses. I did get caught in stuck in working for corporate America for a short period
mm,
of time. Xerox actually recruited me
mm,
from their competitor. So I did work at Xerox, and within 6 months, my nickname became the closer because every time they couldn't close something, I'm like, well, call Michelle. She'll close it. She closes anything. It's kind of like, give it to Mikey. He'll eat it. He eats anything. So my nickname became the closer. And then right away, my supervisor came to me and she said, Michelle, there's a regional vice president position opening up, over 100 salespeople. She said, you'll probably never get it because you've only been here for 6 months. The Xerox policy is you
mm,
have to be here 2 years before they promote. And plus there's a bunch of other people interviewing for it. And I'm
mm,
like, well, why? And she goes, it's going to be a 3 month grueling process. And I said, well, why would I ever waste 3 months of my time for something I'm never going to get? And
mm,
she says, because of the experience.
mm,
She said, you'll learn so much going through this process than anything else. And I said, okay, well, I'll do it. And she's right. It was a 3 month grueling process. We had to meet with all the high level executives, do a Q&A. We had to do a Q&A with them, asking them all these questions about their problems and how to solve their problems and come up with solutions, and then do a presentation and do demonstrations. Anyway, I ended up getting it, even though I was told I would never get it. So I
mm.
guess I truly am the closer. And then I realized very quickly I hated it.
I did all this work and finally landed, and I
Yep.
beat the odds, and I hate it.
Yeah, I hated it. And it's funny because I hated it. Plus, all my friends were mad at me because I beat them out of the position. But
Mm,
what I didn't like about it is, I always say that business owners, if you got a great salesperson, if you have the closer on your team, don't promote
mm,
them. Keep them the closer,
mm,
because not everybody's good. A lot of salespeople aren't really good salespeople. So you
mm,
want to be careful about that. But anyway, the reason I hated it is because corporate America, you can't really get anything done. You're having meetings to schedule more meetings, to have follow-up meetings, and you really can't solve problems. So
mm,
it was just too much red tape for me. I like to get
mm,
things done. I like to say, okay, there's your problem, Devin. Here's our solution. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to fix this within 30 to 60 days. We got results.
mm,
And so I ended up leaving Xerox and went into franchise sales, franchise consulting, franchise development,
mm,
and was partners, with a few different franchisors. And then I kept finding myself saying no all the time. No, no, no. And I'm a yes person. So, I always think for the law of the universe, law of attraction, you need to be yes, 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 right?
Mm.
Buyers kept asking me, do you have existing businesses? I don't want to buy a franchise. And I kept saying, no, no, no. And all of a sudden I'm like, yes, no, I don't, but yes, I will.
I'll figure it out. I will get you that
I will
business.
figure it out. And that's really how I started my mergers and acquisitions firm, out
Mm.
of pure necessity to say yes.
Mm.
And that was 20 something years ago, 1,000 transactions ago. We've
Mm.
done over 1,000 transactions. We've done thousands of valuations. I learned very quickly that what Steve Forbes says is true, that 8 out of 10 businesses will not sell.
Mm.
8 out of 10, 80%. So I'm like, oh my gosh, if I don't fix them, I'm going to starve to death. So that's when I really started fixing businesses, growing businesses, putting them on a build to sell plan
Mm.
so that they could sell for their desired price tag. Because like I said, 80% don't sell. And, on average, get our clients a 20 to 40% higher selling price, I close 98%. I can't say my agents do, but I close 98% of all offers I write.
Mm.
And that's my story. So I've written 3 books, and my newest book is Exit Rich, which is right behind me in case you forget the title.
In case you didn't catch it, no, that's awesome. And I think that was a great intro. And now I'm even more excited to talk a little bit about M&A and how to set things up and how to do it. So maybe just diving right into that, and appreciate absolutely the intro. If you were to say, so a lot of the audience is startups and small businesses. And so one of the questions that I think is maybe a misconception, or maybe you'll tell me it's a good conception, is, are startup small businesses, or should they be thinking about mergers or acquisitions, setting up to sell? Or is that something that you should think about down the road when you're a big company and you have lots of employees and huge recurring revenue? Kind of give us an insight as to when you should start thinking about that, or how you should start thinking about it.
So I'm going to tell you, you should start thinking about that from the beginning, because the number one reason that businesses don't sell and they end up in the 80% is because they don't think about selling until a catastrophic event has occurred. Rather,
Mm.
that's internal or external. Internal being health issues, partner dispute, divorce, death, external, COVID. So you don't want to sell when you're in the middle of chaos, because you're not
Mm.
going to be able to maximize value. So
Mm.
the best time to really think about selling your business is from the beginning of starting or buying your business,
Mm.
and really formulate what I call the GPS exit model. And I talk
Mm.
about that in Exit Rich, of how to do that from the beginning, because so many business owners, like I said, don't think about it. And I had a sweet little old lady call me a few months ago, and she said, oh, I really need you to help me. And I'm like, what happened? And she said, well, my husband dropped dead from a heart attack and
Mm.
left me with a mountain of debt. And she's probably in her 70s.
Mm.
And she said, I need you to sell his business. She goes, I heard about you. And so I started asking her questions about, okay, well, tell me about employees, processes, etc. And he had a contractor's business, a construction business. He had no employees.
Mm.
Everything was in his head. He had nothing written down. So everything, all the data was in his head. He
Mm.
dies, the business dies. There was nothing to sell. And he left her with a mountain of debt. So business owners really got to think about long term, setting your family up for success, not for failure.
Mm.
And I call this a GPS exit model if you want me to walk you through it real quick.
Absolutely. Let's hear it.
So number one, all right. So when you want to drive somewhere, Devin, what do? You pull out your phone, you go to Google Maps, and you plug in your.
I'll give it one time. When I want to drive somewhere, I ask my wife where we're going, and then I put it in the GPS. After I ask her where we're going, then I pull out the phone and I'll either Google it, the name of the company or the name of where we're going, or if I have the address, then I'll put it in Google
That's
Maps.
the best answer I've ever gotten. Ask your wife. Smart man.
That's right.
So anyway, you plug in your wife plugs in her destination. She plugs in where she wants to go. Otherwise, if she just relies upon you, she's going to be driving around in circles. Same
Yes,
thing with
or she'll
business.
end up in a completely different destination. We might have a great time, but we won't get where we're wanting to go.
So, and that's what business owners do. They don't plan to fail, they fail to plan. So they don't have a destination in mind. So they're just driving around in circles, driving up and down the financial hills,
Mm.
to end up nowhere, to end up exiting poor instead of exiting rich.
Mm.
And so first things first, you got to figure out your destination, your end game. And I always tell my clients, pick a number. And
Mm,
I always get hung up on the number. They're like, oh, I don't know. I don't know. I'm like, just pick a number for God's sakes. It's like the lottery, pick a number, you know? So let's say you want to sell for $20 million. Great. There's a start. You might hit it, you might not, but at
mm,
least you have a starting point. You have an end game. You have a desired sales price.
mm,
Then what's the destination need to know? The model needs to know, not the destination. What's that GPS exit model need to know now? It needs to know where you're starting from. What's your
mm,
location? What's your valuation? Do you know that most business owners never get a business evaluation?
hmm,
We go to the doctors once a year to make sure our heart's still ticking and we're still kicking. We drive our car to the shop, but we don't get an annual business valuation checkup. That's financial suicide because there are events that increase valuations and events that decrease valuations.
mm.
So you need to know what your business is worth on an annual basis. Do you know what your business is worth right now, Devin?
Depends on which business. So,
You need to know what every business is worth, not just it depends on which business.
that is true. I do have a pretty good valuation on a few of them, but I'll probably keep that one off air. But yeah,
Yeah.
I
You don't have to
definitely
say the
get.
number. I was just wondering if you actually know what it's worth because most business owners don't know. So let's say you want to sell for $20 million and you're currently worth $5 million. The next step in the GPS exit model is to know your time frame. Let's say
Mm,
you want to do this in 10 years. Great. The
mm,
next step, the fourth step is know who your buyers are going to be. You
mm,
notice I say buyers, not buyer.
mm-hmm,
And the reason buyers is because sellers come to me all the time and say, Michelle, I don't need you to put it on the market. I have the buyer. I just need you to represent me. And
mm,
I'm like, I'm not going to do that because I can pretty much guarantee you that buyer is never going to come to fruition. The deal's going to fall apart somewhere. And then you
mm,
put all your eggs in this one buyer's basket and you have no backup buyers.
mm.
Plus, if we're trying to maximize price and get you the highest value, how can I do that with one buyer? Have them
Mhm.
compete against themselves? you
Hey,
know?
if you can get a buyer to bid against themselves, you're doing great. But no, I definitely agree.
So you
But
need maximum
one
buyers.
question I'll have just to dive in and not to derail the five, and we'll definitely get back to it. One of the questions I've had posed from now kind of figuring out your valuation, kind of asked, what is the valuation? Some of the valuations are quote unquote easier, at least that's what they say, if it's a product business or you have a reoccurring revenue, or you can see this is how much inventory we have, this is our sales trajectory. What I hear a lot of times is on service-based businesses, to where a lot of times it's built up around an individual, right? So if you were to take as an example, I'll take the law firm that, Miller IP Law as an example, but there are a lot of others out there, is you have one or more individuals, or the quote unquote rainmakers, that have the connections, that have the people that they've had long-term relationships with, they're good at selling. And if that person exits, whether it's retire, leave the business, they die, catastrophic, whatever, then it's hard to evaluate the business because a lot of those relationships, you're not sure if they will maintain. So any thoughts as you're getting into how to evaluate a business on a service side business that's kind of that setup?
So remember the story I just told you about the woman whose husband died from a heart attack?
Mm-hmm.
There's no value because his business isn't worth anything
Mm.
at all. But I'll jump into value in just a second because I want to finish
Fair
this.
enough. No, fair enough.
So I'm going to control the narrative, not you.
All right, do it.
So anyway, there's five types of buyers. So your listeners really need to understand there's five types of buyers. So if
Mm-hmm.
you're trying to sell a $20 million company, here's who your buyers are not going to be. It's not going to be a first-time buyer, because, and 90% of buyers are first-time buyers because they buy small businesses. It's not going to be a
Mm,
turnaround specialist because they buy distressed assets.
mm,
So it's probably going to be a PEG, which is a private equity group, and we work with about 3,000 of them.
mm,
So it's probably going to be a PEG, but they buy based upon platforms and add-ons,
mm,
or it's going to be a strategic / competitor. Now I'm going to get into valuations, but
mm.
I'm going to do it when I take you through the 6 Ps
All right.
because it will make more sense. Does that make sense?
Sure.
And then I'm
Fair
going
enough.
to tie how important it is to have a good trademark attorney and a patent attorney. But
Sounds
anyway,
good.
so the strategics and competitors will pay the most for a business. Typically, they'll pay the highest multiple because they're buying synergies.
Mm,
So what you really have to do is identify those synergies in the business, and that drives value. And
mm,
then you have sophisticated and serial entrepreneur, and they are industry agnostic. They chase EBITDA, earnings
mm,
before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization.
mhm.
All right. So then you need to know, well, gosh, if I want to sell my business for $20 million, I know this all sounds simple, but it's harder than you think. Well, I want to sell my business for $20 million. Where's my top line have to be? gross profit margin. Most importantly, where does the EBITDA have to be? Earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, and amortization. To sell for 20 million, you need an EBITDA between 3 million and 5 million,
Mm-hmm.
depending upon your synergies. Then you
Mm.
need to know, well, what's the characteristics? What's the synergies? What are these buyers looking for that they're willing to pay top dollar for, and build your business and meet their specific criteria, right?
Mm-hmm.
You want to do all that from the beginning of starting or buying a business, because even if you decide not to sell, at least you'll have a sustainable business that's scalable and profitable,
Mm.
because at some point you will want to sell it. Because I can guarantee you, look, it used to be that business was handed down from generation, generation, generation. Now the kids don't want your business. They don't. They want to go out there and create their own legacy. They want to
Mm.
create their own masterpiece. They want to make their own footprints on the world, you know?
Mm.
They don't want so less than 10% of businesses are actually um are actually passed on from generation to generation. Less than 10% of all businesses are through an ESOP, which is where you sell to your employees.
Mm.
So it's either a percentage of selling a percentage of the business or selling 100% of the business.
Mm.
The last step is the why. You got to have a powerful why, because if it was easy to sell a business for $20 million, even though Devin, you've probably done it 20 times by now, it's not easy. And most people have a hard time
Mm.
doing it. So your
No.
why has to be power enough to keep you in the game and keep you motivated.
Mm.
So if you want, we can jump into 6Ps and start talking about evaluation.
Absolutely. I'm enjoying the conversation. I'm learning a ton. So let's dive into the 6 Ps.
So there's six, there's 6 different methods that we use for valuation.
Mm.
And the asset approach, discounted cash flow, market approach, sold, comps, um, future earnings, and most importantly, the 6 Ps, because it's all about the synergies.
Mm-hmm.
So, meaning number one, you said, well, Michelle, how do you sell a service business? How
Mm-hmm.
do you evaluate a service business? Well, number one, the first P is people.
Mm.
So, this construction company didn't have any people.
Mm.
He had subcontractors. He had all 1099s.
Mm.
Okay. So number one is people. You don't build a business, you build people, and people build the business.
Mm.
So entrepreneurs have to stop trying to do everything themselves. They gotta focus on their strengths and how are their weaknesses. You need to have the right people in the right seat and ask the who question.
Mm.
Who opens the door? Who handles marketing? Who handles customer service? Who handles dealing with Devin and his legal stuff? Who who does who does transportation, logistics, environmental? The
Mm.
clue, Devin, is you should never be next to the who.
Mm.
You have to create a business that can run without you.
Mm.
So people is the most important thing. So service business, it's very tough. Got a dentist that came into us, wants to sell his business. Been in business 45 years. No other dentist has 3 dental hygienists. And I
Mm.
said, listen, I can sell you a business, but you're going to have to stay for 2 to 3 years. He's like, Michelle, I'm done. I've worked 45 years. I'm done. I said, well, then you can just say goodbye to your business because it's not
Mm.
sellable. When you leave, the patients leave. Same thing with the chiropractor's business we're selling.
Mm.
And when he came to me, he's like, Michelle, I have 3 doctors. I said, great, no problem. Then I start setting up meetings and find out that employees are not going to stay. The doctors are not staying. They're leaving when he leaves. So now he
Mm.
has 0 doctors.
Mm.
And he's like, why haven't you sold by now? I'm like, I haven't sold by now because you haven't found more doctors. You have to have doctors because he
Mm.
doesn't even live. He lives in another state from the practice. So
Mm.
service businesses are very, very tough
Mm.
if you're a lawyer and you don't have other lawyers. If you're a dentist, you don't have other dentists. If you're a chiropractor, medical doctor, whatever it is,
Mm.
you got to have a business and not a glorified job.
Mm.
Many business owners have built their job that they go to work to every day versus a business actually works for them.
No, and I think that's definitely, and I like the, and I can't remember where he picked up. It's one that's out there a lot. You should build a business that you can take a month off from, and it would still continue on. In other words, it's not built so much around you that you take a month off and it falls apart. And it kind of sounds like that's what you're alluding or mentioning as well. Is if you're wanting to sell a service-based business, you have to have those people that are able to run the business when you're not there, able to continue on, such that when you sell the business, it can continue on without you being there. Is
Yeah.
that a fair summary?
Absolutely. And you have to have those professionals. So if you're a lawyer, Devin, I hope you have other attorneys
I
working with
do.
you.
So I've at
You
least
know,
checked that box.
If you're a plumber, you need other plumbers. You know, you got to have that professional. That mean to put you and plumber in the same sentence,
No, you're good.
but you got to make sure you have those professionals if you're in
Mm,
a professional type service business, because
mhm,
otherwise, it is. I can sell it because I
mm,
can, I can do sometimes the impossible, but it's never will sell without that owner sticking around for a few years. Look, I
mm,
got another business that is a fabricator company. They do fabrication, and the owners told me they've been in business 40 years, two partners, they're in their 70s. And they said, honey, we can fabricate anything you want. We can fabricate. I said, okay, where's the PP manual for that? And they go, what? It's all in our head. And they have 4 employees. We've been trying to sell that business for a year.
mm,
And the problem is we could have sold it over and over and over again if the business wasn't so tied to the owners. So
mm,
people is number one. You
mm,
will never grow a business without people. Okay.
mm,
Number two is product, Devin. So when I wrote my first book, and I think this is very interesting, when I wrote my first book, Sell Your Business for More Than It's Worth in 2013, and did the research and learned that
mm,
I learned that 95% of all startups will go out of business. The first 1 to 5 years is the most risky, right? We all
mhm,
know that. That's common knowledge. But when I wrote Exit Rich in 2019, 2020, I did the exact same research and learned that the business landscape has flip-flopped
hmm.
before COVID. And most people don't know this. Only 30% of businesses will go out of business now. Only 30% of startups, I'm sorry, startups will go out of business now. So you startups, this is a great time for you. Go out there and start
Interesting.
these businesses. However, out of 27.6 million companies, those businesses that have been in business for 10 years or longer, 70% of them will go out of business. 7-0. So you see
Really?
how it flip flops. It used to be you've been in business 10 years or longer, you're golden, you're going to stay in business forever.
So now you beg the question. You've probably been leading up to, why is a flip flop? Because I'm curious. Because I always hear the ones, startups for 1 to 5 years is the most risky. Most of them go out of business. So what do
Yeah.
you see? What is the motivation or what caused that flip
So
flop?
here's a reason. So you hear about the big public companies all the time in the media. Toys
Mm,
R Us in business 75 years, goes out of business. Kmart, Steinmart, Pier 1, Godiva Chocolate closing down 1,500 locations. GNC closing down 900 locations. But you're not hearing about all the private companies, and these business owners are being forced to sell for pennies on a dollar, close their business, or file bankruptcy. So why is that?
mm,
Why is that? That's a great question. The number one reason for that is what I call AIM. Business owners stop doing AIM. AIM, AIM, is always innovate and market.
mm,
Always innovate and market. Business owners stop innovating. Toys R
mm,
Us did nothing different in 75 years. Blockbuster saw Netflix, all the writing on the wall, did nothing, sat back fat and happy. They had the opportunity to buy Blockbuster. They did nothing
mm,
and ended up out of business. You have to innovate
mm,
because consumers' buying habits have changed. The way
mm,
millennials buy is not the way that Gen X buys. The way they buy is not the way that baby boomers buy.
mm,
Millennials care more about the experience than anything else, right?
mm,
So whoever makes it easiest for the consumer to purchase products and services is the company that's winning.
mm.
Amazon is winning right now because they make it so easy to purchase their products and have it delivered to your house within 2 days. I mean, you can practically buy a horse on Amazon and have it delivered in
I
two
wouldn't be
days.
surprised if you could buy a horse on
My
Amazon. I'll have to
daughter's
check
trying. I
that.
have a 10-year-old and she's trying. So that's why. So that brings me to product.
Mm,
Product is your industry, your service. You have to ask yourself, is your industry or product on the way up or on the way out? Is it thriving or dying? Do you have an Amazon and you're at the top of your game, or do you have a Blockbuster and you're about to go bust? And many industries, by the way, these statistics are way before COVID, but many industries that were thriving before COVID are now dying and vice versa.
mm,
So if you're in a dying industry, that doesn't mean you just go home and crawl under your bed and crawl up into a fetal position. That means that you got to get creative and align yourself with an expert, with a mentor, and ask yourself really 3 transformational questions. Amazon did this back in the 90s. Amazon asked themselves, what business are we in? And every
mm,
business owner should be doing this. What business,
mhm,
what business are we in? And Amazon said, we're in a book selling business. We sell books. Question number two, Amazon asked, what do we do better than everybody else? And they said, we do fulfillment better than everybody else.
mm.
So the third question, the most obvious question after that is, what business should we be in? And
The
Amazon said, we should.
fulfillment business.
Yeah. And those 3 questions transformed them from a small bookseller company to a multi-billion-dollar worldwide conglomerate that they are today.
Mm,
So every business owner should be asking them questions and you need to, here's another P for you, you need to pivot.
Mm,
So you have to pivot and you have to add congruent revenue streams. One of the reasons that these businesses are going out of business is because they keep doing things the way they've always done them. You're
mm,
either growing or you're dying. There's no in between.
hmm.
And you can't be married to your original concept. You got to grow from that. You got to innovate. Okay.
So let me ask one question on pivoting, because and it comes up sometimes people get in this thing, I just need to stick with it a little bit longer. And sometimes that's true. Hey, you get too early, it doesn't work out. It's not because it won't work, but you give up just short of the finish line. And if you
Like
just
3 feet
step with
from
a little
gold, like 3 feet from gold.
exactly. On the other hand, you can also be saying you get so stuck on what you're doing that you never pivot and your business dies because you never actually take where you opportunities in the market that do present themselves because you're so stuck on where you're at. So any feedback as to how you decide to pivot or when you decide to pivot?
Well, I think, a lot of business owners don't pivot. They stay stuck because when you're in your fog, guess what? It's foggy. So you really need an outsider's perspective
Mm,
to help you see the warning signs and really help you figure out those three questions. Because those three questions are everything, don't you think? I mean,
mm-hmm,
if Amazon would have stayed stuck, Amazon would be out of business today.
mm-hmm,
If they would have kept selling books, they would have probably been out of business today.
mm,
So you really gotta get unstuck. And the most important thing is trying to get out of the tactical
mm-hmm,
and get into the transaction, get out of the transactional and get into the transformational. And a lot of
mm,
times, like I said, you need an outsider's perspective to do that. And that doesn't mean that you just stop selling books. Amazon didn't stop selling books. Amazon still
mm-hmm,
sold books, but Amazon started adding all this other stuff.
mm-hmm,
So as a business owner, you might still do what you do. It's like me. I was selling businesses, but then
mm-hmm,
I'm like, oh my gosh, what business am I in? I'm in the book selling business. I mean, the business selling business. What do I do really well? And I'm like, I know business because I've owned a lot of different businesses and lots of different verticals.
mm,
So I need to start really fixing these businesses. So
mm-hmm,
what business should I be in? And the business I'm in is really specializing in buying, selling, fixing, and growing companies.
mm,
Because I buy companies, I flip them,
mm-hmm,
and I partner with business owners, investing my money, time, energy, and effort. So you don't just necessarily give up something, but you really should have multiple congruent revenue streams.
mm,
That's the problem with like a lot of businesses right now, why they're going out of business is because they have one profit center. Let's say
mm-hmm,
restaurants, one profit center, all their eggs are in that basket.
mm,
They have about 2 to 3 months of 1 to 3 months of working capital. And
mm-hmm,
then they wonder why they go out of business.
mm,
You need to have multiple revenue streams and you need to have at least 1 year of working capital.
mm,
And we need to be smarter business owners in order to weather these kind of catastrophic events. It's like me. I was in New Orleans when Hurricane Katrina happened,
mm.
and 95% of my clients literally went underwater, literally. And I'm like, this taught me one big lesson: never have all of my business in one state. One city and state. So now I got
Mm,
businesses in Texas. I have businesses, in different states.
mm,
So to me, that's, you're always asking that question
mm.
because you should always be growing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. No, I think that definitely makes sense and resonates. And so I think that's a good, and I like the idea of, when you're pivoting, it shouldn't just be, because I mean, you hear pivoting a lot in the business and it's a bit of a buzzword and it becomes, we just need to do something different. Well, don't just do something different just for different sake, but it needs to be, hey, what are we doing I like the kind of the innovating and coming up and finding out who your market is and continuing to make
Well, it's
sure that
got
you're,
to be strategic. It's
yep.
like Apple computers when Steve Jobs came back. Did they have phones back then? No,
Mm,
they had computers, right?
yep.
They had tablets. They didn't have phones. They didn't have
Mhm,
iPads. They didn't have the smartphone. They didn't have iPads. They didn't have iPods. They didn't have, all that stuff. iMusic. He
mhm,
came in and innovated. You got to innovate. And
definitely.
a lot of entrepreneurs are visionaries and they're typically pretty good about innovation. But what happens is they get stuck in the day to day and then
Mhm.
they're working in their business, not working on their business. And now they have no more creative energy. So that's
Definitely.
why
That's an easy thing to get stuck into, in the sense that you have a lot of day-to-day things and you get busy, you get caught
yeah.
up, and then you never step back and say, what is the direction? How are we going to continue to do? And that's why I think one of the worst industries, my biased opinion, is the legal industry, which has been horrible about. Now, I think they're up and comers. I think there are people doing it, and even see LegalZoom that, love them or hate
Mhm.
them. They came along and they did something innovative and different, and that is causing people to now have to shift and adjust. And a lot of lawyers don't like them just because it makes them not be able to do their same thing the way they always did it, because now
Mhm.
they're having to figure out new ways to compete. But I love the idea that you really should be innovating, because if you're not doing it, somebody else is going to, and then it's going to make it so your business isn't successful anymore.
Yeah. And the biggest way to innovate too, the biggest way to innovate, Devin, is ask your clients.
Mm,
Ask your clients. Business owners, stop asking their clients. Business owners, stop asking their clients, what do you need? What do you want? How can I better serve you?
mm,
How can I make life easier for you? How can I make doing business with you, but with us, easier for you? That's what
mm.
Amazon did. You got
Yep.
to start asking your clients, what do you need? What do you want? Because business has changed so dramatically, even now, so even more because of after COVID. You got to ask those questions,
Mm,
right? Because clients'
absolutely.
needs have changed.
Yep. Nope. Definitely agree. And absolutely. Well, we've
Yeah.
had a great conversation. I would love to have probably another hour's worth of conversation, and we would have an awesome time. And listeners would probably say, okay, we've heard enough of MMA. So as we start to wrap up the podcast, I do want to hit on one question I always ask the end of each expert episode, which is, if talking to a startup and small business, you were to give just one thing that they could start taking away today, that they could say, hey, there's a lot of things we covered, a lot of things we chatted about, and they can't, don't get overwhelmed. Start on this one thing. What would that one thing be?
Well, so that's, number one, you buy Exit Rich. That's the one thing. You go through the whole book because we didn't even make it through the 6 P's. We made it through 2 P's.
Yeah.
But I'm
But now
going to
they got a
answer,
reason to buy the book. So it worked out great.
well, I'm going to answer that question with telling you about the fourth P,
All right.
because since you're an attorney and you specialize in patents and trademarks, I think this is the most important,
All right.
because I was trying to answer your question. I was answering your question about valuation.
Hmm.
So the best way to get a highest valuation for your business and sell your business for maximum value is proprietary. The fourth P is proprietary.
Hmm.
This is the number one value driver. So this can take you from a 5 multiple to an 8 multiple to a 10 multiple to a 15 multiple. This
Hmm.
is all proprietary. So why am I saying you should start with this?
Hmm.
Because if you get this wrong,
Hmm.
then you could practically be out of business. So this is probably even before people. Okay.
Hmm.
So proprietary, there's 6 pillars. So I'm gonna make it quick. Number one is branding. You got to brand. The
Hmm.
more well branded you are, the more I can sell your company for, as long as the brand is relevant in the mind of consumers. Nobody's
Hmm.
paying any money for Blockbuster. The most valuable brand in the world is, we've been talking about it.
I'll go with Apple, but I'm worried I'm going to say the wrong one.
No, you're right. Go with your first instinct. Apple is the biggest brand in the world, most valuable
Hmm.
brand, $249 billion.
Hmm.
That's not including accounts receivables, inventory, assets, real estate, EBITDA. That's just a brand alone. Number
Hmm.
two is trademarks. Here's where most business owners get this wrong. And that's why I said, if you're starting your business, get this stuff right from the beginning.
Hmm.
Trademarks. Trademarks are huge, but most business owners will go get a trademark in their state, and then they never
Hmm.
check the federal database.
Hmm.
And isn't it important for them to get a federal trademark, Devin?
Absolutely. I 100% agree on that one.
Because if they've been in business for years and years and years, I've seen this happen to business owners where they've been in business, all of a sudden they receive a cease and desist letter, right?
Hmm.
And they have to stop using that company name. Now they'll hire an attorney, they'll throw lots of money at it, and most of the time they'll lose.
Yep.
And then they have to
And,
start all over again.
and you have to
So
rebrand. You've been in business for multiple years. You put in a ton
it's
of time and effort and
terrible. So
customer
spend
base,
the
and now you,
15.
yep.
I don't know what you charge to get a federal trademark, but my attorney charges me between 1,500 to 2,000. So
Hmm.
spend the 1,500 to $2,000, get a federal trademark, not just on your company name, but your USP, unique selling propositions, anything that is important to you. Like Exit Rich, I'm getting a trademark on the ST6 fees, the STGPS exit model, your podcast. We actually
Hmm.
have a business we're selling that has like 12 different products, and they all have federal trademarks. And
Hmm.
each product is exclusive to like Rouse's and Kroger's and different grocery store chains. So
Hmm.
trademarks are huge, patents are huge. Yeah,
Hmm.
if you watch Shark Tank, every single investor, I mean, I sound like a broken record. Every single investor asks every investor the same question. Do you have a patent on that? Do you have a patent pending? Do you have a utility patent? So patents are huge. Contracts are big too. Manufacturing contracts,
Hmm.
franchisor contracts, distribution contracts, any exclusive contracts. The most valuable of all are your client contracts that have recurring revenue subscription models. But here's a mistake to contracts. And Devin can probably help y'all out with this. Most
Absolutely.
business owners forget they don't have this. And let me tell you something. I've never found a business owner that actually has this in their contract. We're selling a $70 million company right now.
Mm.
EBITDA is over $12 million. No, $17 million. $17 million. Transferability clause that this contract is transferable upon a new entity because 99.9% of all sales are asset sales, not stock sales. And if the buyer refuses to do a stock sale and your clients won't sign a consent to transfer, then your deal can
Mm.
fall apart.
Mm.
So cross your T's, dot your I's, and have that transferability clause in your contracts from the beginning.
No, I love that, and I think that's definitely
Yeah.
makes sense, and definitely, you're speaking my own language. I like and it
Well, that's why
even
I wanted
beyond.
to answer your question because I'm telling you, you got to do that stuff in the beginning. If you don't do the stuff in the beginning, not only will you
Mm.
lose money, you could lose your business, and
Yep.
then you're going to have a really hard time selling it. Databases are the other thing I wanted to mention real quick because Facebook paid $19 billion for WhatsApp, and WhatsApp
Mm.
was making how much money?
I don't know if it was profitable, was it?
Never. They were hemorrhaging. But they had 1 billion users.
Mm.
Buyers pay for synergies. You
Hmm.
know, so celebrity endorsements are big. Any type of we sell a lot of e-commerce businesses. Anytime you can get those top 3 spots on Etsy, Wayfair, Amazon, any of that's huge.
Mm.
Radio endorsements with celebrity endorsements are huge because they can only endorse one vertical at a time. Otherwise, they completely lose credibility. So
Absolutely.
anyway, proprietary, there's 6 P's, but proprietary is the one you must start with,
Mm.
even before you hire people.
I love that. And and you're talking about, but even beyond just patents and trademarks, so just thinking about what makes you unique, what is proprietary and differentiating about you and your business.
Yep.
And then that's when you get into patents or trademarks and building around it. But even starting with that, what is our unique selling proposition? What's different? What's proprietary about us that we can protect is definitely a great place to start. Well,
Right.
we have covered so many fun things. I would love to have it back on at some point, just because we didn't
Well,
even
you
get through
have to, so
all
we
the
can
P's.
finish a piece and I can really
I
get into
know.
valuations for you.
Exactly. I think it'd be great to have you back on, and we'll definitely have to line that back up. But as we wrap up, at least for today's episode, we touched on a little bit. You have the book. If people are wanting to reach out, they want to learn more, they want
Sure.
to be a customer, a client, an investor, a purchaser of your book, your next best friend, any or all of the above, what's the best way to reach out, find out more, and get in
I have
contact?
lots of business, but I can use some friends.
All right.
So first things first, they need to go to exitrichbook.com. I just
Hmm.
want to say a couple things about Exit Rich. My book was endorsed by Steve Forbes, which is huge.
Hmm.
Kevin Harrington, original Shark on Shark Tank, wrote the foreword. Sharon Lecter
Hmm.
is my co-author, who wrote Rich Dad Poor Dad with Robert Kiyosaki.
Hmm.
She's a financial literacy expert, a CPA, and the advisor to many different presidents.
Hmm.
So you can, Exit Rich comes out in June, but you don't have to wait till June. You can go to exitrichbook.com now for $24.79, which is less than it is on Amazon. Yay. So $24.79. We will email you the digital download immediately.
Hmm.
Plus, we'll ship the hardcover to your doorstep for anybody that lives in the US. Outside the US is more shipping, of course.
Sure.
And then we'll give you a lifetime membership into the Exit Rich Book Club, where if you like what you're hearing here, there's more video content and me doing deep dives in different strategy, plus documents,
Hmm.
documents to run your business, documents to sell your business. So we have example employee handbooks, non-competes, organizational charts, sample letter of intents, purchase agreements, due diligence checklists, closing docs. All these documents, if you went to an attorney like Devin, it would cost you over $30,000 to recreate all of these documents.
Hmm.
They're there for your review and download. So for $24.79, you're getting the Exit Rich book plus all the documents plus a 30-day free membership into Club CEOs, which is an entrepreneur mastermind where we ask those transformational questions so we can help business owners build a sustainable, scalable, and when they're ready, sellable business.
Well, that is definitely a great value, great way to follow up, find out the rest of the 6 Ps, and we'll have to have you back on so we can finish that 6 Ps discussion. Definitely encourage people to check it out. And you said exitrichbook.com, and definitely a great way to connect. Well, I want to
But
thank you.
they can
Oh, go ahead.
I was just gonna say they can also text Michelle to 888-526-5750. All my social media pops up. Follow me, connect with me on LinkedIn. And my main website is seilertucker.com.
All right. Plenty of great ways to connect, and definitely encourage people to connect up. A lot of good information, a lot of things to think about as you start and build your business, to make sure that it's on a trajectory for success in the short term and in the long term. Well, thank you again, Michelle, for coming on. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Now, for all of you that are listeners, if you have either your own expertise to share or your own journey to share, we would love to have you on the podcast. Feel free to apply. Just go to inventiveguest.com and let us know, and we'd love to hear from you. Also, 2 more things as listeners. 1, click subscribe in the podcast players so you know when all of our awesome episodes come out. And 2, leave us a review so new people can find out about us. Last but not least, if you ever need help with your patents, trademarks, or anything else, just go to strategymeeting.com. We're always here to help. Thank you again, Michelle. It's been fun. It's been a pleasure. Look forward to hopefully having you back on again in the future. And in the meantime, good luck with your journey.
Thank you, Devin. It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.